All right. Hey, so I kind of was. I don't really give sermons titles. We're in Luke chapter 14. We're going to finish that up today. So if you want to turn there, that's where we're going to be, and I'm going to kind of give us a little running start, which I do every week, and so you probably are tired of hearing it, but it's good for us, and so I'm going to keep saying it, and just kind of remind us of where we are. But this is what we're going to look at today is the gospel mandate that nobody talks about, and so when you I don't know where it was that you came to Christ when you did, if you did, all those things. You go to church and you hear messages, you sing songs, whatever form it is. Maybe it's the 3 hymns and a 45-minute lecture. Maybe it's a whole lot of worship and a little devotional. But at some point, someone's going to make a gospel kind of presentation. And they're either going to say, hey, come down here and say a prayer. Right, and we say this a lot, but I just want us to kind of think through that. Or it's like, hey, every head bowed, every eye closed, and then if you prayed that prayer, then look me in the eye, kind of thing. That was how my pastor, when my first church did, and you'd just kind of supposed to look up at him, and he'd say, "I see you," kind of thing, right? I don't know what experience you had. Some people didn't get saved in church. I'm just saying those are some of the things, right? There's eye walks. We had lots of those, and not in my Bible church days, but at New Covenant, that was kind of a prominent thing that you would see. That was more in the Bible church. You didn't show emotion, so you didn't have eye walks, right? And so you had all those things, and then lots of baptisms and all of that. Seems like we try to create an emotional environment a lot of times too in church, right? And there's get the lights just right, music starts kind of playing underneath the pastor when he's getting ready to give the invitation, right? All of those things. And man, if you grew up like we did, there were scare tactics that they used. They'd take us all out in the woods and for camp, and then show us movies about Left Behind, and it kind of literally kind of scare the hell out of you. I don't want to go to hell, and I don't want to get left behind, and so those are the things. And then these days, it seems like there's a lot of what I would call pleasure tactics. Come to Jesus, He'll take away your pain. You got trouble. Well, that's because you need Jesus, right? And He'll fix that. And I'm not saying there aren't truths in a lot of those things. I just think that Jesus doesn't ever present the gospel quite like that. And so today we're going to see exactly how he does present that gospel, and that's what we're going to do. So let me give you the review to kind of set us up. We stumbled into this series, and I just decided I was going to let the Spirit go with it. We were looking at encounters with Jesus, right? Looking at those. And so I have a book that a couple of things. One, that the Gospels are interwoven, so it takes Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John and kind of weaves them together. So in one section where Jesus is talking about something in Luke, and Mark has a different phrase, it kind of meshes them together, so it reads more like a novel, like just a study. And then I've got a book called the Gospel Parallels, and it's just side by side. Wherever, if that story was in Matthew and Luke, then you see it there. If it wasn't, you see just the one book. And so I just started reading through that, like chronologically through the scriptures, and I was looking for intimate encounters because I just like to know what did Jesus say in all of these little, and so we did a lot of that. And then as we kind of morphed into that, we moved into this bigger sermon on the road kind of thing. And there's a theme in Luke that I didn't know until I just began to read through that text like that. And so he's been talking about the kingdom of God, right? Now, the kingdom of God in their world was going to be about, they thought, like the Messiah was going to come, set up an earthly kingdom right there, right? Just like it's like King David or some new king was coming. He was going to kick Rome off their perch. Daniel said so, and so they're thinking yes, and right, and so they're just thinking there's going to be this kingdom on earth. But God never meant for it to be like that. When we speak of the kingdom of God or the kingdom of heaven, it's an eternal city, not one that's here. This old ball is going to fall apart, right? He's going to remake heaven and earth, and then we're going to live there. And so they all understood at least that concept. It would be an eternal city. They did know that. They may have been confused a little bit on where it was going to be and how soon it was going to happen, but that's what happened. So in our studies we started in Luke chapter 13, We saw the nature of the kingdom, which we just mentioned kind of in our time of worship debriefing, so to speak, that the nature of the kingdom is kind of like a seed that's planted, right? And so this thing starts small. They're expecting some big overthrow of government and all of that, and the Messiah's going to come, and he's just going to, just go crazy. And Jesus is like, it's really more like a seed. You plant it in the ground and it begins to grow, but then it just won't quit growing. And that little mustard seed begins, and the branches of it are going to stretch out, and it's going to reach far and wide. Well, they knew that too, because in the prophets, he spoke of the eternal kingdom being like that, and of Nebuchadnezzar's kingdom, more specifically in Daniel, that it was going to be like that. And so he's saying, hey, listen, it's going to keep growing. This outward expansion is going to grow and grow. It's like a seed. He says it's also going to be an inward growth. He said it's like leaven. Man, when the truth gets in you and the kingdom begins to bubble up from within you, it's going to change you. You're going to grow into a true citizen of what the citizen of heaven looks like. So then you start thinking about that, and you think about Peter when he says, we're just strangers and aliens here, right? We don't look like citizens of this world because we're not of this world anymore, right? And so it's not fist for fist and blow for blow, and right? It's not that. Our weapons are different than that, right? And so we have a higher kind of a standard. And so we talked about that. We talked about the urgency of the kingdom, where he says, hey, listen, it's closing time soon, right? That's kind of what he says. Hey, it's closing, right? Strive to enter in, right? Strive. And we talked about this like a turnstile, right? It's narrow is that way. And so for you and me to strive to enter into heaven doesn't mean, well, I gotta be good. I gotta try and be better, than the other guy. None of that is the thought in his mind. It is that in order to get on that narrow road, you got to lighten your load. You got to get rid of everything, right? It's not like you got to do things. So you got to get rid of things. I've got to put off my pride. I got to put off, my hopes and dreams of things that this world draws me to. And so he's saying, hey, listen, it's closing soon. Then he talked to us about the rejection of the kingdom. And that's where he goes, man, how often, Jerusalem, did I want to just bring you in and really do what you wanted the Messiah to do, but you're unwilling. You won't recognize me as Messiah. And in fact, your leaders, the Pharisees, want me dead. And now, he didn't say all that in the text, but that's everything that's inferred there, right? And so when we get to the end, when Jesus is on trial, and one of the leaders is trying to say, are you sure you want me to kill this guy? They would say, hey, we have no king but Caesar, right? And so we looked at that. And then we looked at the invitation of the kingdom. So these are all the kind of the phrases that we found through the text. We looked at that last week, the invitation of the kingdom. Remember? And it was about, hey, I'm going to have a party. Let's send out the invitations. Well, the original people go, we can't make it. We got this. They all bailed, right? That was the picture of Israel. Here's the Messiah offering them what they want, and they're like, we don't want you. You're not it. Right, your works are of devil. This was what happened, and so then he says. So then in this parable, in this story he told, he said, "Well, man, go out and get the humble. Go out and get the poor and the lame. Right, go get the poor people in the town. Let's forget these people. Let's go after these." And so he's like, "Okay, well, the leadership of Israel has rejected him, but there's some common folk in the land." And you can probably see those lepers that have been healed by him. Maybe those who were demoniac that aren't now. Right, they're like, hey, we're getting this, right? Because they did embrace that. He said, but there's still going to be room. And so then he says, hey, go out into the highways and byways, man. Drag those suckers in, right? That's the Gentiles. That's you and me. He's like, hey, there's room in the kingdom. And so the invitation is, it's for everybody. Now, that's everything that we kind of got to before we get to here today. And that was quick, wasn't it? That wasn't too painful. And so then we get to verse 25, and here's where we're going to see the cost of the kingdom. This is why we talked about all that other up front. Like, I'm not sure everybody understands what the gospel really is. And how am I transferred from darkness to light, right? What has to happen in order for that to take place? Now, we've seen it through the scriptures over the course of the time of our gathering here together, right? We know about the rich ruler who said, hey, what must I do to be saved? He said, keep the law, Well, I've done all that. Jesus knew keeping the law wasn't going to do it, but he was just letting the man know that that's what you thought. So what else do I have to do? This is where it's almost like, oh, you want to go through that turnstile. Oh, you want to go through the narrow way. Oh, you got to sell all your possessions, give it to the poor. Then come follow me. Oh, whoo, don't think I can do that, right? And so we know that Jesus has said these things all through there. Even to the woman caught in adultery, when he says, hey, does no one condemn you, then neither do I. He says, go and sin no more. You can't bring that sin through the turnstile. You gotta lay it aside, right? This is what he's saying all the way through there. So here we are, verse 25. This flows pretty quick. Now, large crowds were going along with him, and he turned and said to them. So let's just look at that first. We're still in the large crowd, right? Remember, we started where it was the what I call the Sermon on the Road, because there were large crowds. He was like, man, there are 3,000 more people, so much so that they're stepping all over each other. And then Luke moved us into the synagogue, and then he moved us into a house, right? And now he's like, hey, we're back on the road, and these large crowds are still there. And so in that crowd are the curious, right? Those are the ones who Jesus would refer to them. You only follow me because your bellies were full, right? Because they were one of the ones of the 5,000 that were on the hillside when he took the little boy's Happy Meal and spread it out and gave it to everybody. And now they're chasing him across the other side the next morning, and he says, "You're only here because your bellies are full, right? Like you're just after stuff. You don't want me." And this is how Jesus presents these things. And then there were the contentious. That would be the Pharisees and all the others. They're there. You know, you're always going to have your critics. Your critics are never far from you. Have you noticed that in life? They will. And you may not know it, but you do one thing that they don't think is right, and all of a sudden they're out of the woodwork, baby. They must have spies everywhere, because it feels like that with me a lot of times. Like, where you been for the past 30 years? Why now when you see my name in the paper? Or why now when you saw this? Or are you going to right here, right? Jesus had those contentious people. Then he had the committed. Those were, well, I guess we would call there were 500 that kind of hung around after the cross. There were 120 in the upper room. So there's that crowd that follow him, right? And then there's the core. These are the ones that said, hey, we're all in. The apostles, right? And the 70 that were sent out, those would be included in that group, I guess. But that's what they are. Now, Jesus is talking about the issue, and he says it in the next verse. If anyone comes to me and does not hate his own father, mother, wife, children, brother, sister, yes, and even his own life, he cannot be my disciple. Whoever does not carry his own cross and come after me cannot be my disciple. Now, disciple is a simple word, matheteos. It means learner. That's all it means, right? You have a teacher and you have a learner, student, pupil, right? That's what he's saying. Now, they understood and would have seen him as the teacher, right? They used that term several times, right? In fact, I think Nicodemus used that, called him teacher. Some called him rabbi, right? Those are all the terms. And so just to help us get a perspective, a rabbi would have these people who would follow him, and not like they show up here, and you got a rabbi, and so you come and listen. It's that you walk with, right? So it's almost like you move into the house. I got a buddy of mine that was doing that over the summer down near Lake Martin, and he's been getting some studies together. But you go live there in this community, and it's a daily thing, right? You study the Word. It's almost like going to college and living in that community type thing. Only this is for if you're going to follow the teacher, then this is what you do. You're a disciple. That is, you're a learner. You're a student. You're a follower, right? Not just I tend to that. No. I'm all in. And then the rabbi, he's the teacher, right? And they had a bunch of those mentors, leaders. In fact, Jesus says this when speaking about the relationship between a rabbi, which Jesus never called himself a rabbi, but the people did. He called himself king and Messiah and teacher, but not rabbi. But for our perspective, what we're talking about here, he's relating to that. Because in that culture, that's what would happen. If you were 12 years old or whatever, you would join some sort of rabbi, and he would take you around, and you would learn things, and you would learn it as you walked by the way, and as you sat down, and as you did stuff, right? And so Jesus made this statement: a student, when he is fully taught, will be like his master. That's the whole point, right? That's what a rabbi was doing, making a bunch of mini-me's, right? I mean, that's kind of what it is. And so in the day in which Jesus is speaking, I can talk to you about three different ones. And I'm just going to give you a little perspective just for fun. Hillel was one who would have been there in Jesus' day. Well, actually, he died about 20 years before Jesus came around, but they all would have known him. There were two famous rabbis in the day, Hillel and Shammai, right? And those are the two ones, and they were opposite, right? Democrat, Republican, or right, left, or conservative, progressive, or whatever you want to call those things. And so Hillel was always pushing humility and grace. That was kind of his thing, right? What is hateful to you to do, what is hateful to you, do not do to others. Now, Jesus took the words of Hillel, flipped it around, and said, do to others as you would have them do. He made a positive out of it, where Hillel was pushing a negative, right? What you don't like, then don't do to others. So he had that humility and that grace, and that was compassion. He was kind of that guy. Shammai came around, he actually lived up until maybe a year or two before Jesus got here, before he started his public ministry, rather. And so he was strict and rigid. Absolute obedience was what he did. It was to be pure and separate. So he would be the one, these two became an issue about divorce and other things, right? Because one was teaching one thing and one was teaching the other, and the people were trying to decide between the two, and Jesus, let me give you the real answer. So anyway, that's a whole other story. Now, there's another one that showed up, Gamaliel, which was Hillel's grandson. And he was actually the one that when the disciples were in trouble, let me see if I put that down. Yeah, I did. Acts chapter 5. But a Pharisee named Gamaliel, a teacher of the law, respected by all the people, stood up in the council and gave orders to put the men outside for a short time. They just arrested Peter and all those people. And he said to them, men of Israel, be careful as to what you are about to do with these men. For some time ago, Theudas appeared, claiming to be somebody, and a group of about 400 men joined him. But he was killed, and all the followers with him were dispersed and came to nothing. After this man, Judas of Galilee appeared in the days of the census and drew people away. They also fell away. And so in this present case, I say to you, stay away from these men, leave them alone. For if the source of this plan or movement is men, well, it's going to fall just like the others did. But if it's the source of God, they're going to overthrow you, right? And then he's also the man that discipled Paul. When Paul was like, hey, I'm a Pharisee of Pharisees. I was tutored. My rabbi was Gamaliel, right? And so I'm saying all that so that we understand kind of the perspective of where Jesus is going, because he's going to say some really strange things here that no other rabbi would have said. And so if I didn't get you distracted by that, that's a little rabbit trail we just read down, in case you didn't know. So now we're coming back, get on the big road. We're looking at this whole cost of discipleship. Jesus says, if you want to follow me, it's going to cost you. Now, if you do remember, after the feeding of the 5,000, and he did go to the other side, they all came to him, and that's when he had the conversation about, you're only here because your bellies are full. He says this, anyone who wishes to come after me, anyone who wishes for me to be their teacher, anyone who wishes to be a part of my tribe, my disciples, you have to eat my flesh and you have to drink my blood. Right? Now, what he meant by that was you have to come to me and you have to believe that I am who I am. I don't have time to take through the text to show you that, but that's what eating his flesh and drinking his blood means. Coming to him and believing. And so Jesus would make statements like that. In Luke chapter 9, several verses before this and this whole thing, he would say this, if anyone wishes to come after me, let him deny himself, take up his cross, and follow me. No one's saying that stuff. Jesus is the one saying that. And so basically, he's just saying, hey, if you come after me, you're going to need to die to self. So let's look at the verses and see what he says. Let's go back to verse 26 there and see what he says. If anyone wishes to come to me and does not hate his own father, mother, wife, children, brother, sister, yes, even his own life, he cannot be my disciple. Whoever does not carry his own cross and come after me cannot be my disciple. Now, what's he saying there? That's a gospel nobody wants to talk about. You're not just going to add Jesus to your mix. He's saying, oh, you want to come after me? You got to give up everything. Everything. This isn't about living your best life now. This isn't about, oh, if you get a little Jesus, let me throw some Jesus dust on you and your marriage will be fixed. Let me throw a little Jesus stuff on you, your finances will come together. This is not that. He's saying, hey, listen, you know what it costs to be a part of the kingdom? It's not an aisle walk. It's not a prayer. Though, in fairness, those may be things that we did to get us there. But that's not what saves us. What saves us is that we say, I'm trading everything about who I am for everything about who he is. This is what he's saying. Take up your cross, or earlier, right? Deny yourself. What does that mean? It's no longer about me. Not about me. Deny yourself. There's no self-worship involved in this, right? There's no self-care. That's garbage from the world. This is about, hey, you die to self, and Christ will be resurrected in you, right? Is Christ in me the hope of glory, right? And so this is what and I realize I'm talking to people who know all this, but it's just important that we remind ourselves of these things. And so he says, listen, it's Jesus over relationships. Because you're gonna have people that aren't gonna like the fact that you're gonna start living a life that's radically different. Right now, there's not a radical different in the Christianity here, not in America. There's not a lot of radical Christian. I don't mean the Sons of Thunder radical James and John who wanted to call fire down on people. I'm talking about there just aren't people who live a holy life in people's faces, so to speak. And so it's Jesus over relationships. You just have to be willing to get rid of all of those. Like it's all him. It's all him. If you're not willing to give up every other relationship for this one, you need to check yourself, right? I think I've shared with you before my friend Saji. I'm going to talk to him about him real quick because it's about that. Saji, when he came to Christ in India, they didn't mind the fact that, over there you can add Jesus to your mix, right? You can add, you got 1 million Hindu gods, you got 1 million gods, sure, throw Jesus in there. But when you start saying that there's only one God and his name is Jesus, well, it creates a problem. And so when Saji, my friend, was in college and he had 2 people that kept coming to his door daily trying to convince him that he should follow Christ. And they wouldn't leave him alone, but they were gracious and loving to them. And so he did embrace the gospel. When he got home, his dad disowned him and said, "You're no longer my son." After he beat him, after he threw his clothes in a little suitcase and said, "Get out of my house." And so that's the kind of gospel that we're talking about. And if you spend time with Saji, and you spend time with others like him, their Christianity is radical. Just go spend some time with my buddy Saji. It don't matter whether it's here in America. It don't matter whether it's in India. I've been with him in so many different countries, and he understands the cost, right? And so that's what we're talking about here. And so the gospel, Jesus says, is about that. It's about Jesus over relationships. Then verse 27, he basically says it's about Jesus over yourself, right? Not outside relationships. Oh, you too. Whoever does not carry his own cross and come after me cannot be my disciple. That's basically if you're not willing to die to yourself. So when you got to die to the world, like no relationship can be more important than this one, and then you can't be more important than this one. You're signing up to be a future slave for Christ. That's it. You're not your own. You've been bought with a price. It's interesting how we hear all those terms in the scriptures, but we don't really relate them to what's going on. We kind of here's how most people teach this. Hey, it's easy to get saved. Now, if you really want to grow, well, then you need to deny yourself, take up your cross, and follow him. Like that's the next step. No, that is the step. It's the only step, right? We think that there's something like we get to choose. Okay, I got my ticket to heaven, and now one day when I decide I want to mature, well, then I'll start doing this other stuff. No, it's not that, right? It's one and. It's the same. And so this is what he says. And so then he gives us 2 illustrations. And these are the two illustrations that help us understand that. why he's saying nothing else but this. Look what he says in verse 28. For which one of you, when he wants to build a tower, does not first sit down and calculate the cost to see if he has enough to complete it? Otherwise, when he has laid a foundation and is not able to finish, all who are watching it will begin to ridicule him, saying, this person began to build and wasn't able to finish. Right? What's he saying? Hey, listen, don't be like the builder, what you're going to end up with ridicule. Right? How many have we seen things around here that like got started and never finished, right? You know, bridges to nowhere and all of that. And it's just like, it looks stupid, right? Tammy, our friends probably thought that when we bought that little house on Old Springle Road, right? Did we count the cost? Apparently not, because we thought it'd be a little dust up, clean up, move some old people furniture out, and there you go. But I think I've told you the story before. Once we emptied the place, we realized there were really no light switches in the whole house. It was just like these cords that lit up a light there, and the water heater was like exposed, and the bathroom was on the back porch, and the back porch's floor was not 4 inches thick of concrete where we were going to put our bedroom. It was like 1.5 inches of concrete, and it was all busted up. And I'm like, there goes our dreams. So now we're looking at each other going, didn't we outsmart didn't I outsmart ourselves? She wasn't in for it anyway. But it was the best house of all the ones I showed her, because the other ones had grass growing through the floor. And she goes, that's a little much for me. But this one maybe we can make happen. It took us 2 years before we could get to that house. But still, there were people that go, what were y'all thinking, right? I didn't count the cost. I didn't know I was going to have to move with my mom and dad for 2 years and all that was going to take place, right? This is what he's saying here. Listen, count the cost before you start saying, hey, I'm going to follow Jesus. Otherwise, you're going to get ridiculed and you're going to be made fun of. And nobody does that. No builder of any worth does that. And so if you're going to come to him, count the cost. Right? This is what we don't take into account. Then he gives us the next illustration, verse 31, 32. Or what king, when he sets out to meet another king in battle, will not first sit down and consider whether he's strong enough with 10,000 men to face the one who's coming against him with 20,000? Otherwise, while the other is still far away, he sends delegation requests for terms of peace. Right? Don't go act like you're all that. And then, hey, I'm going to go to war, because you're going to get in the middle of it and realize that man can eat your lunch. And now you're going to start compromising. Well, hey, how about if I pay you this or if I do that, right? He's saying there's no compromise here. There's no compromising coming to Christ. You don't get to go, well, I'm going to give most of my life to you, Jesus. It doesn't work that way. So he's basically saying, it's about our possessions. Look what he says, verse 32. So then, verse 33, so then none of you can be my disciples who does not give up all his own possessions. So now we've seen 2 or 3 things, really. I mean, right? It's the gospel. It means you have to choose him over every relationship, everyone. You have to choose him over yourself, and you have to choose him over your possessions, right? I mean, that's just it. You have to do what the rich young ruler was unwilling to do. I was in school with a guy, which became my love affair with the country of Belize. His name was Kent Fuller. He came to college when he was an older man. He was a drunkard, a carouser of women and all of that. And his wife, Marion, was a godly lady who just continued to pray for him. And he eventually got saved. When he got saved, he realized, man, my whole country looks like me. And so he wanted to present the gospel to Belize. And so he knew to do that because he had some friends from my college, Southeastern Bible College, came down and would teach. And as he began to listen to some of those things, he went, I want to go to that college. Well, he was half a year away from getting a pension because he had been working for the government. So he's in that season of his life. But Bible college was starting, and he didn't want to wait. So he made this decision to give up the pension in order to get to Bible college because he was desperate about wanting to reach his people for Christ. And so I remember when he came to college, and his kids were in my youth group, and my mom and dad, they do everybody, took them in, and so they became like our family. Everybody was like, why didn't you just wait 5 months and you would have had all this money? But he was like, no. Now he's still kicking. He's probably 85. His parents lived to be 100. I met his mom; she was 100. And so, anyway, I know he's still kicking. I don't know how old he is, but he hadn't quit yet. They're still doing ministry down there. They have an institute down there that teaches people how to do IT work and mechanic work, because those are two jobs in great demand in Belize right now. The roads are horrible, so you always got to be fixing your cars. So they're bringing people in, sharing the gospel, and giving kind of a degree in how to do those kind of things. And so my point is, though, is look, he made that call, and the Lord just rode with him all his life. And I love that about that. And then he says this little last section, verse 24. Therefore, salt is good. But if even salt has become tasteless, with what will it be seasoned? It is either useless for the soil or the manure pile, so it's thrown out. So is the one who has, he said, so then the one who has ears, let him hear. Now, we talk about salt, and I know everybody has their own opinion about what all this is. Let me kind of give you a little bit about what he's talking about there and what that means. So sodium chloride, right? That's table salt, pure, right? The salt they had there, they had some of that, but they also had salt that came out of the Dead Sea, right? Like we have salt, in our Gulf, right? But that was an unstable compound, so to speak. It was mixed with mineral and sodium, and as it got washed, it looked like salt, but it had no sodium chloride in it, and so it didn't preserve, it didn't flavor, it did nothing. It looked like it, just didn't flavor, right? And so that's what he's saying. This is what he means. Therefore, salt is good, but if salt becomes tasteless, what will it be seasoned? What will be the use of it, right? But basically, what he's saying, that's a call to the Pharisees and everybody else. Oh, you look like salt. You look like you love God. But there's no flavor there. There's no preservation there. Men, people are dying. In fact, that's how Jesus will refer to them. You people go chase a convert and then make one twice the son of hell, right? There's no life. You're not giving a life to anybody. You're putting them in bondage to works. And now they think they're going to heaven, and they're not. So you made them twice the son of hell. They were born headed to hell, and now you've convinced them that if they'll just follow you, they're going to heaven, and they won't. And so now they're twice the son of hell, right? This is what he's saying here. He's like, hey, listen, a disciple without devotion is useless. Just like a Pharisee who won't lay down his stuff is useless. So the call for you and me is that just because you name the name of Christian, if there's no flavor and preservation in your life, you're just a waste of space in that aspect of things. And so this is what Jesus is calling us to. So we talk about this gospel that no one ever talks about. Jesus is saying, back to the turnstile. I love this illustration that I've had in my head, right? You know the turnstile you go through, like if you go ride the train or whatever in different places where you got to go. You've been through a turnstile before, right? You know those little wheel things. Mm-hmm. You can't carry your baggage through that thing. I'm telling you, we've tried that a few times in Amsterdam. It just doesn't work. You got to hand them over the deal, because there's not enough room to get through that little thing. And this is what he's saying here. Listen, you have to let go of everything to follow Christ. It's not that you come to Christ, he will clean you up, but you have to get rid of everything for that to happen. If he's not Lord of all, he's not Lord at all. I realize, I know I'm preaching to the choir here, but there are a lot of people who don't think that. And you and I run into a lot of people out there that think they're Christian because their mom and dad were, or they're Christian because they sit in a pew, or they sit in a seat somewhere for what we call Creaster, right? Christmas and Easter. They're those kind of people. And you go, oh yeah, no, that doesn't get it. It's an all or nothing. You got to give him everything. Jesus over relationships. Jesus over possessions. Jesus over my thoughts. I want his mind. I have to have his thoughts. Jesus over my feelings. Jesus over my actions. Jesus over my purpose for my life. All of it is his. This is what it means. It's an exchange. Everything about who he is for everything about who I am. That's the gospel. And nobody speaks about that. But I just want to make sure we know that that's what it is. Mm-hmm. And so glad you came by to hear the TED Talk. Just kidding. I love you guys. Man, this is a great song to